Can you tell us what inspired you to create Invisible Vision, and what was the message that you're hoping to?
I really felt fortunate, lucky to be coming to Taiwan 2016, 2017, the first term of President Tsai Ing-wen, because in the United States, we had a very different kind of president, who unfortunately is back in power, but who was clearly not very pro-democracy. So it was my first chance, really, to witness an actually good leader of a democracy, a good person who cared about the progress of democracy and cared about showing the world why Taiwan matters, and we should all care about Taiwan's story and Taiwan's democracy and freedom and the way of life here. But I really learned so much working with Feng Xianxian, and I actually learned so much from Wu Peiyi. Everyone I had the opportunity to meet and interview here blew my mind. Really so smart, so passionate, and dedicated to democracy. And I think that story has so much to do with the history, which people don't know. They really don't know in the rest of the world how, and unfortunately the United States in its foreign policy supported this dictatorship in Taiwan and 38 years of martial law. So there's a very clear understanding of why democracy matters for everybody and why dictatorships are terrible. And I think that especially after having lived and worked and studied in China and looked at the US-China foreign policy relationship, you see it now in the United States. There's such a tendency to worship dictators and authoritarianism, and this absolute, greed among the people that think that way. It's so selfish and so destructive of people's lives, of a country and its democracy. So I truly think there's never been a more urgent time to get Taiwan's story out in the world, because every democracy, but also every authoritarian government, people living in authoritarian countries can learn from Taiwan's people, Taiwan's story, the resilience, the incredible sense of the importance of democracy here, because we need it in the United States, we need it in Europe, we need it all over the world. So I feel lucky, I feel grateful. I want to say thank you, Wu Peiyi, thank you, Feng Xianxian, for sharing Taiwan's story with me so I could learn and I could share it with people who, like me, are learning it for the first time and hoping to translate it to a wider international audience.
You followed Taiwan's first female president from 2016 through her 2 terms. How did you observe her role evolve in the office influence your storytelling choices regarding gender, leadership, and Taiwan's democratic trajectory?
These are great questions. I feel like it was a learning process for both of us, that I understood, and this makes sense to me as a woman, but that when President Tsai began her first term, she was more closed off. She was less open and personal, and over time learned that it was beneficial that people could feel that kind of human connection with her. And I initially was told not to ask any questions that were too high stakes, like directly asking about cross-strait relations wasn't a good idea. And there were actually interviews where things were said that we were then told, and this isn't just with President Tsai, maybe don't put that in the film, which after her 2 terms, basically by the time we're starting to finish the film, toward the end of her 2nd term, everyone we interviewed said, put it all in, like, it's okay, this is important and urgent, and the time is now, and we can talk about China, we can talk about the cross-strait relationship. And I feel like President Tsai, you see in her strength in speaking up for and standing up for Taiwan, she was continually tested, starting more in her 2nd term, whether it was with COVID or with the crackdown on Hong Kong, which I think accounted for a lot of her popularity, that sort of surge that brought her election again, her second election win in 2020, Hong Kong, and then what happened to Ukraine with Russia's invasion. So I think the world became more dangerous, and President Tsai became more strong and tough and serious and speaking up and standing up for Taiwan.
Were there any challenges throughout these 7 years? And there's a lot of pressure from other countries as well. So how did you overcome that?
Every time I felt personal pressure or sadness about the challenges of raising the money or the challenges of finding support, I assumed would have been present in the United States and elsewhere. I reminded myself that nothing I was going through as a filmmaker was as serious or intense as what people fighting for their lives in democracies and trying to keep authoritarianism away are experiencing. So really, I felt, again, privileged to observe and experience Taiwan, and people hear how they kind of overcome a constant dread of an actual military invasion or political takeover. There's nothing that compares to that. Actually, we're facing it in other countries, potentially in the US. There's a potential for martial law to be declared in Los Angeles. As I'm flying here, this is coming up. So whatever I experienced was nothing compared to the story I was focused on telling. It was always bigger than me, and it was always important to keep myself in perspective.
The film captures deeply personal moments from President Tsai, both in her office and casual home life. How did this process help shape your perspective on her leadership and on Taiwan's identity?
Well, first I want to acknowledge what producer Sylvia Feng was saying, Feng Xianshen, about the unique and rare opportunity to be granted access to speak with and follow a president. I didn't say this, but when I was making my film about U.S.-China diplomatic relations, I followed U.S. Ambassador to China, John Huntsman. There was no way I was ever going to get any real access to any politician in China, in Beijing. So in Taiwan, to have this felt incredibly democratic, actually, at first. It felt there was an exhibit at the presidential office building when we began filming that was called Power to the People. It was so cool. So I really feel tremendous respect for President Tsai for granting us access when she knew we were an independent film and they in the government wouldn't have any control over how we told the story. As a person, I immediately connected with President Tsai. I just thought she's warm and funny and smart and sophisticated and well-educated and very concerned and focused on the future of the people of Taiwan and its democracy. And that came through. Like, her whole life is devoted to Taiwan and the people of Taiwan. And to have never had children, never been married, or any other relationship. It's Taiwan. And I have tremendous respect for that. I think she's a model for a lot of us in the world, especially for women's leadership. We need much more of it. There's a huge imbalance. There's a huge imbalance all over the world in gender equality. And Taiwan is actually leading progress for the better, for the future. That's another way we can all learn from Taiwan. And I think choosing people she did in her administration, whether it be Kim Shao or Chen Chu, were also really good examples of just really forward-thinking, smart, caring, empathetic leadership. I know that former Prime Minister of New Zealand, Jacinda Ardern, has begun a program in Europe focused on creating more empathy in leadership. Empathy, that's like anathema to our current government in the United States. So if that's coming from women in power and leadership, great, but it's definitely something I experienced, I witnessed, I filmed, and I put in this movie is the way in which President Tsai leads with empathy.
The documentary highlights Taiwan's ongoing struggle for international recognition under pressure from China. What moments in the film most capture this tension, and how do you think they resonate with the global audiences?
I guess as part of being a privileged person from the United States, I really assumed people in power wanted to do good, and people in power care about everybody that they're supposed to be taking care of and leading. So the way in which China overtly tries to exclude Taiwan from international organizations, whether it's World Health Organization, part of the United Nations, in the middle of a global pandemic, the first one being SARS and now COVID, whether it's excluding them from the Civil Aviation Organization or Interpol or any of the diplomatic allies that Taiwan needs to exist. I think overall, the understanding I came away with was it's very important in democracy, in government, in leadership in general to recognize all people in your country, in other countries, and to disagree. We can have disagreements, but not if our disagreement is based in your denying my right to exist, my very humanity. And I think that Taiwan has such a strength and courage, as Pei Yi was saying, because you're faced with this denial of your right to exist in every which way. And so it's an overall picture of a people understanding their own worth and understanding that others out there will understand and get it and support them. And I hope this movie can do that.